on every single minister to make sure that Egypt is at the top on the media. But I need to save the best for last, for the CEO of EEAA, Dr. Ali Abu Sinna, and his team, who has been following up on every single logistic, thematic initiative, technical negotiation, as well as the drivers and the office boys, and to greet well all EEAA CEOs who has been in this position. They are in this room, and we belong to that organization. I wanted them to be part of our celebration, because an institution does not last with the people, it lasts with the blocks and the memories, and one working after the other. So thank you all for making me so proud and living that moment to serve in the government of Egypt to witness the COP27 success. Thank you all.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I will give just a very few remarks before we close the opening session that I would love from you all to stay with us and bear with us all the day long, because in fact all the sessions are complementing each other. So just try to be with us all the day long. And while for the translation, there were already available translation, Arabic, English, and French. So please use whatever you feel comfortable. And thank you, Your Excellency, as well, on behalf of my team and on behalf of our colleagues from UN Environment, that we have such opportunity to present something that we really loved. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and please stay in your seats. We're going to move straight on with the programme ahead of us. And we've heard a lot from the opening session there on the inseparable nature between biodiversity and climate. And we're going to explore that further in the first pillar of the day, the first of our three pillars. And we're going to do that through the two main dimensions of connection between biodiversity and climate. We're going to look in the first pillar at the climate change impacts on biodiversity, and through that impacts on ecosystem services, nature's contributions to people, and of course communities and society and the economy and human health. And then we're going to look in our second block climate adaptation agenda. We're going to move very quickly, given time, into this first session, and so I'm going to invite, to kick off our discussions in the first pillar, a short presentation from the co-chair of the IPCC Working Group 2 on Impacts, Adaptation and Vulnerability, and also co-chair of the joint IPCC and IPBES, the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, joint workshop report recently on biodiversity and climate change. So with that, let me pass across to Professor Dr. Hans Otto Portner for this presentation. Please, Hans Otto.
Good morning, everybody. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot for your interest and for the opportunity to be with you here and report back on our activities looking at the issues of climate change and biodiversity together. Can I have the first slide, please? I'm referring to our recent assessment report of IPCC Working Group 2. First slide. Thank you, and as already mentioned, and thanks a lot for this introduction, I'm also referring to the first ever official collaboration between the IPCC and IPBES, and in the vision that we need to address these issues together. Next slide, please. I'm referring to a whole set of reports that we have been... Next slide. Can somebody move the slides forward? I'm referring to a whole set of reports, starting with the special report on 1.5 degrees, climate change and land, ocean and cryosphere under climate change, and then our main assessment report. And the respective findings of Working Group 2 are actually providing guidance. They are guiding ambition in mitigation and adaptation, supporting and setting the long-term global goals for protecting ecosystems, biodiversity, human society, landscapes, and also the economy, and last not least, the bioeconomy. Next slide, please. What is already happening is indicated here with some examples. As we've heard in the opening, human pressure on biodiversity is increasing constantly. At the same time, conservation efforts have not been sufficient to stem the loss of biodiversity on a global scale. And now human-induced climate change is also kicking in and increasingly threatening nature and its contributions to people. For example, and this is causing, and the two of them are causing together through the overuse of natural resources. For example, we are seeing losses in fish stocks through overfishing, increasingly through climate change. Then we are seeing excessive drought having its impacts. We are seeing heat waves causing mass mortalities, and excessive wildfires also causing mass mortalities. And all of these issues develop over time. Some of them develop together. Next slide, please. So what is the future for habitat and for species and for biodiversity? And that is indicated here on these global maps, where you see with increased global warming, we will see a loss of habitat, especially in the low latitudes, and that goes across the land and the ocean. And you see this purple color expanding from 1.5 to 2 to 3 to 4 degrees. And this means an excessive loss of biodiversity in those places where temperature goes beyond the heat limit tolerance of the organisms, and organisms in this case is animals. Next slide, please. What we are already seeing is actually that these mechanisms are in effect. Next click. We are seeing an ongoing loss of tropical habitat due to thermal stress. We are seeing a biodiversity valley being expressed in around the equator, in the tropics, due to high temperature extremes. And these trends are paralleled by the movement of organisms to higher latitudes. But what this means is biodiversity is essentially, and emphasizing, is essentially moving and causing a loss of habitat, and this process has already set in. But there is also the need for research. We don't have a good enough understanding actually which factors are defining the levels of biodiversity, and you see how biodiversity is declining towards both poles and towards the high latitudes. So we are, in a way, through global warming, losing the areas where we have the highest level of biodiversity. Next slide. But this is not only for species and biodiversity, it's also true for us. We as mammals are part of the animal story. We are seeing here from the present or recent, with the degrees of global warming, an expression, an intensification of colors for the areas where we actually see an increase in the number of days where environmental conditions become intolerable for us to be outside, for all mammals sort of to be outside, including our livestock. So again, it's indicating a loss of habitat for our species and for biodiversity in the low latitudes. This is certainly something that needs to be stopped, and that is why we are having a global goal on limiting global warming, which is actually what keep us on the not fully safe side, but on the safer side. And the dimension of this is quite impressive because it concerns 50 to 70% of the population periodically by 2100. Next slide. At the same time, being reliant on biodiversity and its services, its contributions to people, as we call it in the IPBES realm, these are tied to biodiversity and they are at risk in a warming world. This concerns pollination, it concerns coastal protection, so coral reef. It also concerns the needs that we have as a species, tourism, recreation. It concerns food supply, health of the human species, but of all the other species as well, provision of clean water and clean air, and last not less, and that's a point currently in the discussion, nature is contributing to climate regulation. Next slide, please. As an example of these ecosystem services that are under threat with climate change, you see an expressed reduction of fish biomass with the degrees of global warming, where the purple area indicates how severe that reduction can actually develop over time, and that even with global warming of 1.5 to 1.6 degrees, we will see some of this effect. Fish stocks are moving, and especially in the lower latitudes, we are going to use some of the fisheries revenues that we are currently still enjoying. Next slide, please. And the other climate or ecosystem services, climate regulation and carbon storage, where we must say limiting global warming to below 1.5 degrees is actually an essential precondition for us being able to maintain and to keep that service. What you see here in the reddish areas in the two globes is that even in current climate, heat extremes are depressing the capacity of ecosystems, and this is a focus on forests, on forest ecosystems to store carbon and bind CO2. And this is more expressed by the 2040s with ongoing global warming. And you see the capacity of this again going across all latitudes on the right-hand side, where the bluish color is reflecting the current capacity and the orange line.
Et de réduction de la pauvreté au Sahel et en Afrique de l'Ouest. Le comité permanent inter-État de lutte contre la sécheresse dans le Sahel, SILS, que j'ai l'honneur de diriger, s'investit depuis 50 ans dans la lutte contre les effets de la sécheresse, de la désertification et du changement climatique à travers la délivrance de services climatiques et le renforcement des capacités des différents acteurs, aussi bien régionaux que nationaux, pour une meilleure résilience des populations sahéliennes et ouest-africaines. Mesdames et Messieurs, les pays de l'espace SILS sont classés parmi les plus vulnérables et sont au cœur des défis de changement climatique au regard des impacts négatifs qu'ils subissent et des difficultés à y faire face. Par conséquent, il devient urgent de soutenir les efforts de cette région à travers des financements adéquats et des appuis pour une meilleure intégration des risques et impacts des changements climatiques dans les politiques et les programmes de développement. Mesdames et Messieurs, l'accord de Paris invite les organisations régionales à agir conjointement pour une meilleure efficacité de l'appui aux pays dans les stratégies d'adaptation et d'atténuation du changement climatique. Dans cette optique, la Communauté économique des États de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, CEDEAO, s'est dotée d'une stratégie régionale climat qui constitue désormais un important levier régional de pilotage de l'action climatique pour faciliter la mise en œuvre de l'accord de Paris et au-delà la mise en œuvre de la Convention cadre des Nations Unies sur les changements climatiques. Parmi les nombreuses priorités identifiées par les pays de l'espace CEDEAO, je citerai pour ce qui concerne le volet adaptation au changement climatique la nécessité de passer de la planification à l'opérationnalisation de l'adaptation au changement climatique, notamment à travers la démonstration de l'avancement des travaux du comité d'adaptation. En ce qui concerne les pertes et préjudices, des progrès significatifs doivent être réalisés.
Thank you, sir, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Professor Charles Andre Velayodum Marimutu, Secretary General of the Commission the Ocean, India. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Je remercie la présidence égyptienne de la COP27 pour son accueil et l'occasion qui nous est donnée de porter la voix de notre région insulaire, vulnérable par nature, mais ambitieuse par choix. La Commission de l'océan Indien est la seule organisation régionale d'Afrique spécifiquement insulaire. À la voix de nos États membres du sud-ouest de l'océan Indien s'ajoute celle des îles africaines de l'Atlantique. Nous faisons face aux mêmes risques. Nous vivons, comme nos frères et sœurs de la Caraïbe et du Pacifique, la bande-annonce des cataclysmes qui s'annoncent partout. L'humanité a imposé au système Terre une nouvelle ère, l'Anthropocène, dont la caractéristique première est celle des disruptions majeures et des risques systémiques. Ce qui est en jeu, c'est notre propre devenir. Or, jusque-là, les promesses pour s'adapter sont insuffisantes. Les engagements pour accompagner nos efforts et nos actions sont insuffisants. Les moyens pour nous permettre d'être résilients sont insuffisants. Et à ces insuffisances s'ajoute un sentiment d'iniquité. Nos îles d'Afrique subissent les dommages des dérèglements climatiques dont elles ne sont pas responsables. Les coûts humains, financiers, matériels sont concrets et les risques de pertes et dommages sont évalués à plus de 17 milliards de dollars pour la seule région du sud-ouest de l'océan Indien sur les 20 dernières années. La COI, en tant qu'organisation régionale de solidarité et de proximité, résolue dans l'action régionale face aux défis climatiques, plaide pour une mise en œuvre accélérée des engagements de Glasgow, notamment pour le doublement du financement d'adaptation d'ici 2025, comparativement au niveau de 2019. La prévisibilité et la disponibilité des ressources d'adaptation et d'atténuation sont essentielles, mais l'accessibilité est primordiale. Nous plaidons pour un accès facilité au financement climatique pour les îles en développement et les États vulnérables d'Afrique. Cet accès facilité ne doit pas être conditionné par le revenu par tête d'habitants qui exclurait des îles à revenus élevés ou intermédiaires tranches supérieures. Ce qui doit être pris en compte, c'est l'indice de vulnérabilité des territoires aux effets du changement climatique et aux chocs externes, ainsi que la capacité réelle de relèvement post-catastrophe. Cet accès facilité est aussi une question de justice climatique. La COI appelle également à l'opérationnalisation du réseau de Santiago et pour un mécanisme de financement des pertes et dommages avec un fonds dédié. Ce serait un résultat important de la COP27. Le financement climatique est clé.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome the Right Honourable Patricia Janet Scotland, Secretary General of the Commonwealth. Madam, you have the floor.
Madam President, in 1989, the Commonwealth leaders predicted the permanent and irreversible damage to our environment and demanded a coordinated global effort. Whilst we watch, their prediction is coming true. Untold loss and damage. We've seen it in Tonga, Nigeria, Pakistan, where devastating floods left a third of the country submerged. And as I speak, we see it across the Caribbean. In every region of our Commonwealth, home to 2.5 billion people, fertile lands turn to dust, wells run dry, storms and floods overwhelm communities, and the ocean rises. Vulnerable states being consumed by the waves or drowned by debt. The unthinkable has become typical. Yet, as climate change advances, we have lost momentum. The gap on emissions, finance, and justice has widened, whilst the window for action continues to narrow. It is our duty to close that gap, and this process is our only chance, because we cannot compromise with catastrophe, so we must compromise with each other. We must reject the violence of inaction against those who need us to succeed now and for generations to come, and commit ourselves to action on land, ocean, energy, finance, and resilience. Our children and every generation to follow are counting on us. Our responsibility is to them. They will be our judge, and we can do it if we are prepared to seize the promise of sustainable shared interest. There is still just enough time, but there is none left to waste, and there are no more excuses. If not us, then who? If not now, then it will be too late. Thank you.
I thank you, Madam, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome Stefan Schmitz, Executive Director of the Crop Trust. You have the floor, sir.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, climate change is severely threatening global food supplies. Crop failures and poor yields as a result of climate change are contributing to poor nutrition and health, loss of livelihoods, forced migration, and other injustices. This burden is disproportionately shouldered by the world's poorest and most vulnerable people. Safeguarding crop diversity and making it available to plant breeders, scientists, and farmers is essential to the climate resilience and sustainability of food systems. Safeguarding crop diversity is essential to lowering the environmental footprint of agriculture and meeting the nutrition, health, and livelihood needs of our growing population. Safeguarding crop diversity for all of humanity is a moral and economic imperative, and time is running out. With every passing year, we lose more biodiversity, and once it is gone forever. It is gone forever, putting us at a disadvantage in our efforts to feed ourselves and protect our planet. Making food systems work for everyone requires a global partnership. The Crop Trust has developed with its partners a comprehensive plan to safeguard the diversity of the world's most important crops and make it more readily available to those who need it to feed the world. Central to this plan is a guarantee for the funding of the essential operations of a global network of seed banks. The plan also calls for working in new ways with policymakers, journalists, business leaders, and other influencers to create the political will and private sector engagement required to guarantee our food. Over the last 20 years, a core group of visionary donors have contributed more than $250 million. Now, a major push is required to strengthening the financial basis that would allow the crop trust to fully deliver on its mandate. We need more diverse food systems that contain diverse wheat, rice, and maize crops, but that go beyond these staples and encompass a wide diversity of millets, pulses, vegetables, and fruits. Crop diversity matters. Thank you for your attention.
I thank you, sir, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Khusrav Noziri, Secretary General of the Economic Cooperation Organization. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, increasing number of extreme weather events like recent examples of floods, droughts, sand and dust storms in the ECO region, which regrettably affect the poorest the hardest, making the impact of climate change increasingly apparent and felt by countries and communities in the region. Currently, ECO countries recognize the significance of transition to a low-carbon and resilient development pathway. The big question is how to do such transition while meeting urgent development needs. While emphasizing the importance of boosting mitigation and adaptation efforts as global responsibilities, we need to emphasize that delivery of the promised climate finance is of urgent importance to drive transformative action on adaptation and mitigation. Such mobilization of climate finance should represent a progression beyond previous efforts and achieve a balance between adaptation and mitigation. In such a context, ECO underscores the necessity of enhanced and proportionate means of implementation, while reiterating commitment of the ECO region to Paris Agreement. It should be really noted that the activities in the region are to a great extent tied to proportionate means of implementation. We need to ensure efficient access for developing country parties to adequate climate finance through simplified approval procedures, capacity building and technology development and transfer. What we need is not only a green but also a just transition that leaves nobody behind. If the green transition doesn't work for all, in the end it will work for none. So we have to make sure that all countries benefit from such transition and avoid making extra burden for those who can least afford it. I would like to conclude by underlining the potential role which can be given to the regional organizations like ECO in this respect, taking into account the Paris Agreement great emphasis on climate-related technology transfer, public awareness and capacity building for developing countries. These organizations, if empowered, would be able to act as a hub for coordination and enhancement of support in these areas and ensuring that the provided support would be tailored to the specific circumstances of the region. The ECO Secretariat is prepared for facilitating such cooperation to enhance the global climate.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Hamal, Secretary General of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to address this Conference of the Parties on behalf of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum. The UNFCCC clearly underlines that economic and social development and poverty eradication are the first and overriding priorities of developing country parties. This is all the more so right here in Africa, a continent that suffers from poverty and from the adverse impacts of climate change, while being the least responsible for it. 650 million of its population lack access to electricity and 1 billion to clean cooking. Yet, Africa is well endowed in energy resources, notably natural gas. Its sovereign right to develop these natural gas resources shall be preserved, and Africa's access to financing and to technology shall be facilitated. Because natural gas is the energy for sustainable development. It satisfies 23% of world energy needs, provides cleaner cooking, reduces indoor pollution, and improves air quality. As a dispatchable source of electricity, it is a partner of renewables. And as a key input for producing fertilizers, it contributes to food security. Eliminating gas flaring, reducing methane emissions, and scaling up carbon capture, utilization, and storage will make natural gas even cleaner. Investing in natural gas is part of the solution to ensure affordable, secure, and sustainable energy. The GECF member countries are investing in natural gas to support sustainable development goals and energy security, as well as a fair and equitable energy transition, and transition that is smooth, cost-effective, and leaves no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome Dario Soto Abreu, Executive Secretary and Chief Executive Officer of the Global Water Partnership Organization. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. In some regions, it rains more than ever. In some regions, there are more droughts than ever. For farmers and communities around the world, water comes and goes at unpredictable times now. This affects livelihoods, food supply chains, and the global economy. This year alone, in Pakistan, more than 2 million houses were destroyed by floods. In Africa, 4 million farmers saw their crops destroyed because of unusual water patterns. We must act on water now. This means investing more in joint initiatives, new technologies, and nature-based solutions. This also means coordinating more among governments, development agencies, and the private sector. This also means making data more widely available for decision-making. Decisive collective action in water now will save us, our children, and our planet. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome Jan Beagle, Director of the International Development Law Organization. Madam, you have the floor.
Madam President, colleagues and friends, as the only global intergovernmental organization exclusively devoted to promoting the rule of law to advance peace and sustainable development, IDLO firmly believes that it is essential to apply a justice lens to climate action. The causes and effects of climate change and the actions needed to address them are fundamentally linked to issues of justice, equity, and accountability. This is true not just within and between countries, but also between present and future generations. Drawing on IDLO's experience, allow me to share 3 important ways in which a rule of law-based approach can be a catalyst for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. First, empowering people and communities to claim their land and participate in climate decision-making is not only just, it can also unlock transformative changes on alleviating poverty, ending hunger, and promoting gender equality and sustainability. This is particularly true for traditionally excluded groups, including women, Indigenous people, youth, and other marginalized communities. Strengthening both formal and customary justice systems can enable those with the least capacity to adapt to change, to advocate for their environmental rights, and contribute to solutions. Second, delivering climate commitments at the national level, from the green energy transition to the implementation of effective mitigation and adaptation measures, will require new laws and more responsive justice institutions and governance capacity. And third, the rule of law can promote the trust and accountability needed to mobilize climate finance and deal with issues of loss and damage equitably. This, in a nutshell, is what a climate justice approach can offer. IDLO is committed to working with all partners to promote a more just, green and sustainable future through the rule of law. Thank you, Madam President. It is a pleasure to see a woman leader from a small island developing state chairing this meeting. Thank you, Madam.
I thank you, Madam, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome Didier Colombe, General Director of the Institute International de Fraude. Sir, you have the floor.
Mesdames et Messieurs les délégués, le secteur du froid, qui inclut la chaîne du froid pour l'alimentation et les produits de santé, le conditionnement d'air, la cryogénie et les pompes à chaleur, est désormais reconnu au sein des Nations Unies comme une priorité de développement pour ses bienfaits pour la vie humaine et une priorité en matière d'environnement pour son impact sur le changement climatique. Nous nous en réjouissons. L'Institut international du froid, IIF, compte 59 pays membres dans le monde entier et constitue un réseau mondial d'experts issus du monde universitaire et industriel. L'IIF participe déjà à de nombreux projets de recherche-développement et de démonstration, seul ou en partenariat. Établissement de chaînes du froid pour l'alimentation au Bangladesh et en Inde pour le compte de la Banque mondiale, utilisation du gaz carbonique comme frigorigène en Inde et pêcherie durable avec la Norvège, utilisation de l'énergie solaire et de frigorigène naturel pour des hôpitaux et pharmacies en Afrique avec l'Union européenne, stratégie de neutralité en carbone pour 2050 pour la chaîne alimentaire en Europe avec l'Union européenne. L'IIF mène une politique active de publication à destination des techniciens et des décideurs, sous forme de guides et de notes d'information sur tous les usages et technologies du froid, permettant de diminuer l'impact sur le réchauffement climatique. L'IIF organise aussi régulièrement des congrès et conférences dans ses pays membres, ouverts à tous, comme ses publications. L'IIF est prête à vous accompagner pour opérer les transitions nécessaires, tant en termes de frigorigènes à faible potentiel de réchauffement planétaire et de technologies efficaces et moins gourmandes en énergie qu'en matière de formation. Merci.
I thank you, sir, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome Shyam Satguru, Executive Director of the International Tropical Timber Organization. Madam, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the tropics are home to over 40% of the global population and houses more than 70% of those who live in extreme poverty. Land and coastal tropical forests account for 45% of global forest areas. They produce the oxygen that we breathe. And tropical forests in particular serve as carbon sequesters, carbon sinks, and provide effective solutions to substituting less environmentally friendly materials. The United Nations, the Collaborative Partnership on Forests, including ITTO, and other international processes acknowledge and endorse the positive contributions of forestry. They are the most effective nature-based solution in meeting climate challenges in terms of mitigation and adaptation. Yet we have seen that the interface between forestry, agriculture, mining, and other more economically positively yielding competing land uses are still there. The nexus is not clear. The nexus and positive contributions of the forest sector to climate mitigation and adaptation remains blurred. So far, only 9% of COP26 and 27 funding has been allocated to the agricultural, forestry, and fishing sectors, with no clear distinction on the breakdown of that percentage. To ensure the sustainability of forests for future generations and to ensure a better planet and health and wealth for the global population, the ITTO supports credible accounting systems, accessible finance, upfront investments, and also incentives. It needs to be acknowledged that tropical forests will and can contribute to food, water, energy, and livelihoods, security, leaving no one behind. Thank you for this privilege. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Bruno Oberl, Director General of the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Sir, you have the floor.
Madam President, colleagues and friends, the catastrophic floods, droughts, and hurricanes 2022 underscore that the climate emergency is now upon us. IUCN expresses its deep concern at the limited response of parties to the request made in Glasgow to strengthen their NDCs by the end of 2022. We urge parties to urgently respond to the latest science with more rapid and deeper reductions in their greenhouse gas emission. This is imperative to keep 1.5 alive. COP27 also offers a unique opportunity for the international climate community to reinforce the deep links between the climate and the biodiversity crisis at the critical role that nature-based solution can play by offering a high-integrity framework for addressing both. This will send a powerful signal of support to CBD COP15 that will take place in Montreal next month. We welcome the leadership of the Egyptian presidency in launching the ENACT partnership in Sharm el-Sheikh on enhancing nature-based solutions for an accelerated climate transformation. IUCN is proud to have collaborated with the government of Egypt in this effort. We invite all parties to join this partnership. We also urge them to clearly recognize and reference the important role of nature-based solutions in the formal decision text of COP27. This will enable parties to exercise oversight and accountability on the implementation of nature-based solutions and provide greater confidence to all actors in their deployment. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank you, sir, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Haitham Al-Gais, Secretary General of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. President, Madam President, actually, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to start by saying a big thank you to Egypt for the gracious hospitality and the excellent arrangements. At this pivotal point in negotiations, significantly, COP27 returns to Africa. Africa is vital for OPEC. 7 of our 13 member countries hail from this great continent. Being in Egypt, that is also a country with significant and diverse energy resources, underlines the importance of having all voices at the table. We need to abide by the principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, with developed countries taking the lead to address climate change and fulfilling their commitments to support developing countries. A promise made, but unfortunately not yet delivered. Our approach must be guided by trust and inclusivity, considering the particular circumstances and priorities of developing countries, while ensuring low emissions future in which every person has access to energy. Clarity and transparency with commitment are required on climate finance and investment. We have heard calls for energy exporting countries to play a key role in ensuring stable global energy markets, and simultaneously calls to end the financing of hydrocarbon projects. Distinguished delegates, the complex and intertwined challenges of energy affordability, energy access, energy security, and sustainability must be addressed through this multilateral process, recognizing the sovereignty of all nations and the right to development. The multiple global crises we face underline the importance of working with rather than against each other. A just and inclusive energy transition is not about the misguided narrative of abandoning one energy source for another. The key lies in ensuring a long-term investment-friendly climate with sufficient finance available, one that's fair and viable for both producers, consumers, and developed nations. For the oil industry alone, we see global investment requirements totaling $12 trillion. The oil industry is not the problem.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome the Honorable Mr. Pedro Roque, President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. On behalf of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean, let me start by saying that our Assembly is deeply concerned by the climate emergency, which has catastrophic effects on the global environment and on the Euro-Mediterranean and Gulf regions in particular. The Mediterranean Sea is a climate change hotspot, warming 20% faster than the world average, while sea surface temperatures that have reached the highest records in 200 years. We are experiencing the dire consequences of our own inaction: increase in extreme weather events, sea levels rise, acidification, biodiversity loss, prolonged droughts, and water scarcity. In addition, the consequences of the brutal Russian aggression against Ukraine have jeopardized our energy transition plans. Dear colleagues and friends, the climate clock is ticking, and our Assembly fully supports the United Nations efforts to establish the Climate Solidarity Pact. For PAM, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean, is of utmost importance to reinforce North-South cooperation, and we are committed to promote further this process in our region. We must show the same unity we have demonstrated during the pandemic. Joint international action is the only possible solution. There is no planet B. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, sir, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Henry Puna, Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am from the Pacific, a region at the forefront of the impacts of climate change, a region where the climate crisis is our daily reality, but a region whose preservation can also signal the survival of this planet as we know it now. For us, urgent and immediate action is not just a rallying cry. It is a statement linked to our very survival. To this end, I am sad and disappointed that interest groups are hampering the process of transition to clean and renewable energy, using global events such as this as a pretext for lack of action. We are losing precious time. We cannot afford to delay while our people in the Pacific battle increasingly severe climate change impacts. We have all heard the signs. We've all heard your commitments. Now we need to see your action. Scale up ambitious actions to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. Make good on your commitment on $100 billion in climate finance. On loss and damage, we're already experiencing loss and damage, and now delaying tactics are not acceptable as they push our region further and closer to climate catastrophe. For us, this is not rhetoric or political fanfare. This is about the survival of our future generations. You've heard our story, you've seen our climate reality, and we in turn recognize that the impacts of climate change are also a global reality now. Witness the recent unprecedented megastorms in Alaska, destructive flooding in Pakistan, extended droughts in the Horn of Africa, destructive and more regular storms on the east coast of the USA. They all serve to remind us that climate change is indeed global and requires global response from all of us without exception. I stand with my Pacific leaders and reaffirm their call for more ambitious climate change action. I call on all leaders of the world, all countries, especially the big emitters, work with us, join us to ensure a sustainable future for all our people. At the end of the day, we're not here for ourselves. We are here to secure the future of our future generations, all of our future generations. I thank you.
I thank you, Your Excellency, Secretary General, and former Prime Minister of Cook Island, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Jaoud Al-Kharas, Executive Director of the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. Sir, you have the floor.
سيدتي الرئيسة، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الضيوف الكرام، تحية طيبة مباركة لجميع الحضور. يشرفني باسم المركز الإقليمي للطاقة المتجددة وكفاءة الطاقة أن أتقدم بجزيل الشكر لمنظمي المؤتمر، وأخص بالذكر اتفاقية الأمم المتحدة الإطارية بشأن تغير المناخ وجمهورية مصر العربية على حسن التعاون والتنظيم، كما أتقدم لجميع الدول والمنظمات والقطاع الخاص والعام ومؤسسات المجتمع المدني على حضورهم الكريم. المركز الإقليمي للطاقة المتجددة وكفاءة الطاقة هو منظمة حكومية دولية ذات صفة دبلوماسية تسعى إلى تفعيل وزيادة الاستفادة من ممارسات الطاقة المتجددة وكفاءة الطاقة في المنطقة العربية. كذلك يعد المركز الذراع الفني لإدارة الطاقة جامعة الدول العربية والمجلس الوزاري العربي للكهرباء. يسعى فريق المركز بالتعاون مع الحكومات والمنظمات الدولية ومؤسسات التمويل الدولية والقطاع الخاص عن طريق الشراكات المختلفة لبدء وتوجيه وحوارات سياسات الطاقة المستدامة واستراتيجياتها وتقنياتها وتطوير قدراتها وإدارة منصات لتسهيل استثمارات الطاقة المتجددة وكفاءة الطاقة لزيادة حصة الدول العربية من طاقة الغد. يسعى المركز جاهدا منذ أكثر من 12 سنة إلى قيادة مبادرات الطاقة المجددة وكفاءة الطاقة وتقديم الخبرات ذات الصلة في جميع الدول العربية الأعضاء في مختلف قطاعات الطاقة المستدامة والعمل المناخي، وذلك من خلال العمل على وضع سياسات والخطط والاستراتيجيات الوطنية، بالإضافة إلى تفعيل العمل الإقليمي لدعم الاستثمارات في الطاقة المتجددة وكفاءة الطاقة والتكنولوجيات التي تساهم في تخفيض استهلاك الطاقة. ومن هذا المنطلق ومن تقييمنا الوضع الحالي لمسار الانتقال الطاقي في المنطقة العربية والعالم أجمع، نؤكد على ضرورة أن يكون كفاءة الطاقة والطاقة المتجددة الأولوية التي تستحقها للمساهمة في تحييد الكربون في كل القطاعات الاقتصادية لخدمة الأهداف المناخية، كما أننا نؤكد على ضرورة التنسيق بين الحكومات والجهات المانحة الدولية والمنظمات الدولية لحشد المزيد من التمويل الأخضر والاستثمار لقطاعات طاقة نظيفة وكفاءة الطاقة، وأن نراعي الأبعاد البيئية والاقتصادية والاجتماعية بشكل أساسي في مرحلة التحول الطاقي المستدام المنشود. وتوجب أخيرا التأكد على رؤيتنا نحن مركز إقليمي الطاقة المجددة وكفاءة الطاقة الشريك الاستراتيجي
economic and environmental demands.
وختاما فإن نجاح هذا المؤتمر هو
I thank you, sir, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. M.D. Masuma Rahman, Director General of the South Asia Cooperative Environment Program. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to deliver this speech on behalf of South Asia Cooperative Environment Program and to witness this historical moment here in this beautiful city of Sharm el-Sheikh. At the same time, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the government of Egypt, our most generous host, for hosting this globally important conference this year. Madam President, as the intergovernmental organizations, responsibility for biodiversity, climate change coordination, waste management, pollution control, and environmental governance in the South Asia region, SACEP works to support its 8 member states by the provision of environmental advice and support, and served as an ideal platform for bringing together our 8 member states into a common place where discussions were held on various important environmental issues. SACEP is also the Secretariat of South Asia SEAS program. Madam President, South Asia region is home to about 1.9 billion population and shares mountains, rivers, oceans, energy sources, as well as weather and vulnerabilities associated with climate change. The overwhelming dependence on agriculture and natural resources for living makes the people of this region very vulnerable to climate change. Madam President, in line with our mandate, SACEP has been actively engaged in areas to strengthen the capacity of our member states in synergy with the development partners. Finally, as a pioneer organization, SACEP will remain committed to continue work with its member countries who remain steadfast on their obligations under the Paris Agreement. Thank you, Madam.
I thank you, sir, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Carlos Correa, Executive Director of the South Center. Sir, you have the floor.
Señora Presidenta,
Madam President, Your Excellencies, we're all aware of the scale of the crisis facing the world, the climate crisis, and the developing countries historically have not been responsible for the emissions jeopardizing the life on our planet, and these are the most affected and have the least capacity to address it. The South Center, as an intergovernmental organization of developing countries, attaches particular importance to and focuses its work on the intersection of climate change policies with other policy frameworks. The fulfillment and further expansion of the commitments by the developments, and we must see a scaling up in terms of climate financing, which needs genuine increase in ODA. And we have to also address the issue of debt in developing countries, and we must establish an effective finance mechanism for loss and damage. We welcome the recognition by the Human Rights Council and the UN General Assembly of the right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a human right, as well as the right to access to clean water. We hope that Cop27 agrees on actions to realize these rights. Climate change action is not possible without wide and timely access to technologies and effective fulfillment of the developed countries' obligations in this regard is indispensable. A suitable international regime needs to ensure that green technologies are treated as public goods and facilitate patent-free green technology transfers and dissemination. Climate change, the initiatives to link climate change with trade rules may create trade barriers to developing countries' participation in the world market. The UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement should remain the primary framework for addressing climate change. The international investment regime is inadequate to promote green projects that reduce CO2 emissions and to promote sustainable development. It also needs a profound reform. Climate change, unfortunately, is also impacting human health. This is another matter that requires attention in the climate change context and not just as a purely public health issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome Albara Tawfiq, Chair of the Board of the Adaptation Fund Board. Sir, you have the floor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Madam President. On behalf of the Adaptation Fund Board, I'd like to reiterate that parties in the Glasgow Climate Pact recognize the importance of the adequacy and predictability of adaptation finance, including the value of Adaptation Fund in delivering dedicated support for adaptation, and invited developed country parties to consider multi-annual pledges. The Glasgow Climate Pact also urged developed country parties to at least double their collective provision of climate finance for adaptation to developing countries from the 2019 levels by 2025. The Adaptation Fund stands ready to receive a significant share of increased levels of adaptation finance. In line with this ambition, the Adaptation Fund Board in October 2022 has approved its next medium-term strategy for the period 2023 to 2027, and its new resource mobilization strategy and action plan to help meet the needs of developing countries as reflected in the steady increase of funding requests and approvals. I'm happy to report that the Adaptation Fund yesterday held its annual high-level contributor dialogue hosted by the government of Egypt here in Cop27, during which contributors announced a total of $105 million in new pledges for the fund, which brings the total pledges and contributors for the year 2022 to nearly $172 million. We're expecting more announcements of pledges in the remainder of the week and remain open to any interested contributor who wish to contribute to the fund's resource mobilization. We hope that the new level of contributions that was achieved for the fund last year will indicate a trend for future resource mobilization in the coming years. To help implement the fund's new medium-term strategy, which focuses on locally led and locally based adaptation. I thank you.
I thank you, sir, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Jules Doret Nyondro, President of the Commission des Forests of Africa Central. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame. Thank you, Madam President, ladies and gentlemen. COMIFAC is an umbrella organization for 11 Central African countries from the Congo Basin. It's 10,000 species of plants and more than 1,400 species of animals, and all of them are protected. A huge swathe of forests under manager, and we are following the standards of responsible management. We have a less than 1% deforestation rate, which is one of the lowest in the tropical forest basin. Our emissions are at 500 million tons, which is minuscule compared to developed countries, and almost 31 million tons of carbon. And our forest therefore plays a key role in regulating climate change. Therefore, we are making a huge call for more climate transparency and to recognize the importance of ecosystem services in African forests in Central Africa. We ask for a proportional quota proportional to the Congo Basin, and efforts to preserve and responsible management. We call for setting up a sovereign carbon market. The voluntary market did not yield fruit for the tropical forest countries, and we denounce the double standards, and we have come under systematic criticism from Western countries each time they want to look at forests as a development tool. And yet there is a complicit, if not condoning silence by the same NGOs and countries when the developed countries need carbon sinks and such the like. Thank you for your
There are clear indicators that we are finally in a position to move away towards cleaner resources such as wind and solar. Green hydrogen is projected to grow rapidly in the coming years for several reasons. To mention some, significantly lower cost of producing hydrogen from renewable energy sources as a result of a technological development. And let me tell you that lately in Egypt, we could manage actually to get the solar energy for only 2 cents per kilowatt hour, or for wind for only 2.4 cents for kilowatt hour. This is the very latest information, and actually I believe this is perhaps the lowest all over the world now. The global urgent need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as many countries are taking measures to decarbonize their economies, especially in the production and consumption sectors, which has helped focus on clean hydrogen technologies. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, from a long time ago, Egypt's electricity sector have started its transition to low-carbon electricity sources. It relies basically on exploiting renewable energy resources and contributes significantly to improve energy efficiency, securing electric supply, and reducing emissions. The Egyptian leadership urged the preparation of an integrated national strategy for the production of low-carbon hydrogen, green hydrogen, to be honest to say, as it is a promising source of energy for the near future, as Egypt is rich in renewable energy resources, especially wind and solar, that qualify to be one of the major renewable energy producers. A lot of measures have been taken to develop hydrogen in Egypt, as on 5th of March 2022, an MOU signed with EBRD to provide finance for consultancy work regarding the national hydrogen strategy. A lot of meetings have been held between the consultants team and the technical team from the Ministry of Electricity and Petroleum. Yesterday we signed actually about 9 framework agreements. It's signed between the Ministry of Electricity, the Sovereign Fund, and the SC Zone. This framework agreements will be going into operation immediately. It is worth mentioning that on 8th of November, during Cop27 activities, the first phase of the green hydrogen plant, an actual plant, this is represent a certain implementation of this subject in Ain al-Sukhna, has been already commissioned. The event was attended by His Excellency, the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and the Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the global changes we are witnessing confirm that no country alone can deal with the new challenges, nor can it alone secure all of its energy needs. Regional integration is one of the fundamental pillars of sustainable development in long term. Finally, I would like to thank European Union for their continuous support in all fields of energy, especially of renewable energy and green hydrogen projects to achieve sustainable development and environmental conservation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Executive Vice President Timmermans, please.
Thank you very much, Tim. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really glad to see that we're giving a new momentum, extra momentum to our energy cooperation. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. We had agreed with the Egyptian authorities this should land during the COP meeting this week, and here we are. And I believe it is of extreme importance because the world is changing fast, the challenges are only increasing. If we want to do what we have promised in Glasgow, and that is to still have a shot at the 1.5 degrees, we need to rapidly decarbonize our societies and our economies, but we don't want to do that by deindustrializing. We want to give our industry new momentum. And to do that, electricity is very important, but electricity is not enough. So we will need hydrogen, green hydrogen, to make that happen. And that is the context within which we work. There will be a rapidly increasing market for green hydrogen. And the challenge we face together is whether we can ramp up the production of green hydrogen in sync with the demand of green hydrogen. And I believe Egypt is ideally placed, because I believe this development will take place in the wider Mediterranean area. I want to include Africa in that, but it's the wider Mediterranean area. I also believe if you look at the natural circumstances Egypt is blessed with, you have limited potential for solar and wind energy, potential that goes way beyond your own needs in terms of electricity, which means that that potential can be used to make green hydrogen that can be a huge part of your own industrialization, sustainable industrialization, but also make you part of a new global market for green hydrogen. And I am really excited that the European Union is part of this development, and we will see so many benefits for Egypt, but for both of us coming out of this. But we need to crack a couple of nuts, and the most important one is how do we ramp up this production fast enough to meet demand? Because the rest of the world is not sitting still. They're also developing these things. So we need standards. We need agreement on how we develop these standards. We need also to unleash the financing that is necessary for this. And the public authorities need to create the right circumstances for private financiers to be able to come in. And this is, I think, everything we're doing now. In Europe, we will be increasing our need of hydrogen up to 20 million tons by 2030. That's quite a lot. 10 million tons we hope to be able to produce ourselves. So that's already a market of 10 million tons for hydrogen coming from elsewhere. Also because of the proximity of Egypt to Europe, transporting that hydrogen over long distances is still technically complicated, but we're not talking about a long distance when we talk about Egypt. So Egypt again is ideally placed for that. So before you think I'm trying to oversell this, I truly believe in this. I truly believe in this, and I really want to thank the ministers who are on this podium with me for their vision, for their leadership, for the attention they're giving to this. And I also know that President Sisi is very much on board for this development, which offers us a possibility for even stronger cooperation. Now, we're also signing a tripartite declaration of support to Egypt's energy wealth initiative. And it is quickly becoming part of my vocabulary, thanks to you. I really like the vision, and you've explained it to me many, many times. I really like this vision of an integrated approach to how you can bring your country to the next level and leave no one behind, because that is the essential element of your approach. So we have huge challenges to address on adaptation and on increasing the resilience. And it is very important to take into account the full water-energy nexus. I asked my team, tell me what is a water-energy nexus, but I now understand that if you are faced with water issues such as Egypt is, you need to make sure that through new technologies, new developments, you have enough fresh water to cater to the needs of your nation. Again, renewable energy will play a huge role in this, because it will allow you to desalinate at a much lower cost and make it more accessible. And that will also lead to huge benefits in combination with irrigation for Egypt's agriculture production. Well, I've been speaking for too long as it is, but I just wanted to transmit my strong feelings about this initiative. We have a strong interest in reinforcing cooperation to achieve our shared goals. It will do many things. It will help us decarbonize, show the world that the 1.5 is still within reach, and at the same time it will give our economies and our industries a new lease of life in a sustainable way for better and new jobs for the people that need jobs, and for a stronger position in the global economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Minister El Molla, please.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a pleasure to welcome you today at this most important event, a significant event, which is the Cop27 at Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. It's a privilege and an honor witnessing cooperation between the Arab Republic of Egypt and the European Union grow over the years. This truly asserts the worthy efforts and accelerated actions between both sides for the benefit of our nations. Ladies and gentlemen, the global energy landscape has been going through major shifts, fluctuating energy demands and supply across regions, in addition to the global urge of addressing climate change and providing affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy. In order to overcome this energy trilemma, it is important to consider a holistic and collective approach to develop solutions with all sources of decarbonized and clean energy. One of the most prominent solutions that is gaining international momentum is renewable hydrogen and its derivatives, as it can significantly contribute to the objectives of decarbonization and security of energy supply, while representing an opportunity for industrial cooperation, economic growth, and job creation. In this respect, Egypt has already taken a number of key steps to advance development of its low-carbon hydrogen economy, including during the ongoing COP27. In the roundtable of investing in the future of energy, green hydrogen, that was held last week, His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi announced the launch of the Global Renewable Hydrogen Forum in partnership with Belgium and a number of international partners. In addition, two important milestones were witnessed yesterday, namely the announcement of Egypt's national low-carbon hydrogen strategic framework, and the second was the signing of 10 framework agreements with leading international private sector companies for green hydrogen projects with total electrolyzers capacities of 24 gigawatts and expected investments exceeding $50 billion. Distinguished guests, Egypt and the EU share a common strategic vision for energy cooperation and the need for accelerated actions towards the goal and objectives of the Paris Agreement. In light of this, we are signing today an MOU between Egypt and the EU on a strategic partnership on renewable hydrogen, with the aim of working jointly to develop the production, consumption, and trade of renewable hydrogen and its derivatives. This MOU reinforces the importance of collaboration between the different stakeholders to create synergies and bring expertise, resources, as well as technologies to develop solutions to confront climate change. Egypt will therefore continue to collaborate with its partners to unlock the full potential of hydrogen and support its vision to become a low-carbon hydrogen hub in the near future. Excellencies, distinguished guests, as my words come to an end, I would like to thank all entities present here today for the significant commitment, cooperation, and responsibility towards prosperity of our people, environment, and economies. I believe that the future will always be promising as long as we continue to engage and work with all stakeholders to innovate and develop solutions for our common challenges. Thank you.
And the floor goes next to Commissioner Simpson, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you, ministers, Executive Vice President, ambassadors. After my visit in Cairo in June, it is great to be back in Egypt for Cop27. And today we are here to reinforce the EU's increasing strong cooperation with Egypt, a reliable partner in the energy field. And I want to thank Minister El Molla for his support to the EU, as we have been struggling with a difficult security of supply situation in Europe. In the EU, we are completely transforming our energy system based on the climate objectives as agreed in Paris and translated into our Green Deal strategy. Also, as a response to Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine, we have taken the irreversible decision to end our dependence on Russian fossil fuels. Renewable hydrogen will contribute to these efforts. The EU is set to become a leading producer and consumer of renewable hydrogen, and we will not be able to meet this domestic demand, this domestic production only, so we will also need to import hydrogen from trustworthy partners. Egypt has significant untapped potential in renewable energy. Its abundant solar and wind energy resources will allow it to decarbonize its own economy, as well as become a clean energy exporter, not only of hydrogen, but also other products like ammonia and synthetic fuels. Announcing this important step at the COP27 with a host country is a sign of the importance we attach to this partnership and to its potential to boost our respective energy transitions. Egypt is one of the first partners with whom we are concluding such a partnership, and we hope that this will mark the first step towards an EU-Mediterranean renewable hydrogen partnership, setting a good example for many others to come. Our work together will look at the hydrogen infrastructure and financing needs, transport solutions, as well as regulatory issues. And it will contribute to setting up a global framework for a rules-based market for hydrogen, including harmonized safety and environmental standards. While we look ahead to the energy system of the future, we should not lose sight of the essential need to make the clean energy transition just for all. And I'm therefore especially glad that we have also agreed the EU's financial support to the energy leg of Egypt's next climate change strategy, the Nexus, Water, Food and Energy. Through the Energy Wealth Initiative, Egypt aims to phase out 5,000 megawatts of gas-based power generation capacity and instead support 10,000 megawatts of new renewable electricity capacity, and this is a big step towards net zero. We will contribute to this inspiring program with up to 35 million euros, providing support for green infrastructure investments, assets decommissioning, supply chain developments, and measures to ensure a just transition. This initiative will benefit both the environment and economy. So this is a day of finding win-win solutions to our common challenges, and I'm looking forward to seeing these solutions in action. Thank you.
Thank you. And I give the floor finally to Minister Al-Mashhad.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. My colleagues, ministers, your excellencies, Executive Vice President Mr. Timmermans, the Commissioner, Ms. Simpsons, and it's just a very remarkable day, and I think if there's a barometer for the happiest Minister of International Cooperation globally, that would be me. It was a very remarkable week where we showed how we can leverage on international cooperation and partnerships to create the link between climate action and development. Each and every project that we are talking about, each and every opportunity, be it the green hydrogen, be it the energy pillar within our country platform, the nexus of water, food and energy, NWEFI, all of this is really tailored to make sure that we are able to, as Executive Vice President Timmermans always says, energy security as well as also pushing climate action and creating jobs. So this is a very important day for us. The relationship with the European Commission, with our EU partners is extremely strong, and we were able to leverage on this as we are putting forward plans to move towards decarbonizing our systems through the energy pillar of NWEFI, and also the strategy that we're going to be signing today on the green hydrogen. The other thing which is very significant, the country platform of NWEFI, we're trying to show an example of partnership, how we can move from pledges to implementation together with our partners. This all comes with a very clear commitment, particularly from our president, who has a vision to move forward when it comes to Egypt's renewable structure, as well as exploring more in depth the green hydrogen as a very important economic sector. It also shows the clarity, always moving from pledges to implementation. Having investable projects has always been one of the reasons why we don't see pledges making their way into implementable projects. And here I want to thank our partners, EBRD and others, for their very detailed partnership on the different projects to make them investable and available for not just development partners, but also for the private sector. And all of this concessionality is really to foster private sector engagement within Egypt's energy, as well as food, as well as water sectors. The other important point is credibility. As was mentioned by European Commissioner, Egypt does have credibility with all of you. Over the years. This is not the first time we're starting our projects together. We are continuing what we have started since 2014, and this is a very important testament to a triangle which I call commitment of the government through policy and regulation, clarity when it comes to the projects and designing them with our international partners, and third, credibility with all our both bilateral and multilateral partners. Through the country platform, we were also able to add innovative financing tools, and let me here mention the debt swaps with our German colleagues, which came with a declaration with the US, Egypt and Germany. Very, very important, sets the standard for other countries as well. Looking forward to the signing today. And we thank the European Commission, the EU, all the ambassadors of the G7 countries for being with Egypt hand in hand in this and in other projects as well. And I always end my statement by saying, let's NWEFI together, let's fulfill our promises and our pledges together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all of our speakers. Shukran. We will now proceed with the signature ceremony. So I would ask my colleagues to come up with the declarations to be signed. So we'll first sign the Memorandum of Understanding on the Strategic Partnership on Renewable Hydrogen that will be signed by Executive Vice President Timmermans and Commissioner Simpson, and by Minister El Molla and Minister Shaka El Makabi.
think there will be a team picture at the end with all the...
Okay, so we have ink on the paper on the first. Join. Okay, thank you very much. And now we'll sign the second declaration, which is the declaration on the nexus of water, food and energy. That will be signed by Executive Vice President Timmermans and Commissioner Simpson for the European Commission, by Minister Al-Mashat on behalf of Egypt, and by Ms. Harmgart on behalf of the EBRD. Okay, so these ones are all signed as well. I'll just invite our speakers to come and stand in front of the desks for a photo, and then I will hand over to my colleague for the press Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellencies. May I ask you to be seated once again?
To helping young people maximize their potential to address climate change. We call upon negotiators to put your common future first, ensure the implementation of Article 6.2 and 6.4 on carbon markets to be transparent, and protect the environmental integrity and human rights throughout all provisions. On adaptation, we encourage parties to engage youth-led organizations in shaping the GGA at all stages from decision-making to implementation. We urge parties to finally deliver the adaptation finance that Global South countries desperately need, promised in Copenhagen in 2009. On loss and damage, this COP must establish loss and damage as a permanent item on the negotiation agenda and ensure access to finance and technical support for urgent loss and damage around the world, as well as establishing the finance facility. On ACE, we applaud the commitment of parties to no longer delay action on ACE through establishing an ACE action plan rooted in human rights and intergenerational justice. However, we also expect your commitment to go further by raising the baseline on financial instruments for ACE activities and implementing activities for each ACE element. On future COP, this must be the last COP to be so influenced by conflict of interest. It is reported that there are more than 600 fossil fuel representatives here at COP27, almost outnumbering the entire children and youth civil society climate movement present. Future COPs must address conflict of interest and ensure youth and children are adequately supported to have fair and meaningful representation. We strongly urge parties to sign the UNICEF Declaration on Children, Youth, and Climate Action and call upon the institutionalization of the Children and Youth Pavilion. Finally, future COPs must never again ignore the connection between human rights and climate justice or be marred by the dire treatment and conditions of peaceful activists. No climate justice without human rights. We're not yet defeated.
I thank you for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome Kira Sherwood O'Regan on behalf of the Disability Caucus. Kira, you have the floor.
E te o te tui, e kete te kāka, e kōra ki te kō kako, e tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Kira Sherwood O'Regan, and I greet you all as an Indigenous, kaitahu, neurodivergent and disabled woman whose intersecting identities bring me to this COP. I see rising seas and coastal erosion eating away at my sacred sites, my urupa and Moiraki, and melting the glaciers of my mountain Aoraki. I also see climate disasters that continue to leave disabled people to die. I see climate mitigation policies that might cut emissions, but also cut access and inclusion, and climate movements that often call for justice while being completely exclusive and inaccessible for disabled people. Worst of all, during an ongoing pandemic that, like climate change, has hit us first and worst. We are disproportionately impacted by climate change and the ableist responses to it. Yet despite this, and despite many parties' existing commitments under the UNCRPD, few nationally determined contributions even reference disability. Parties must uphold disability rights in their plans and policies as a red line. After years of advocacy from disabled activists, we welcome the disability rights language in the draft text of ACE. We recommend that this be adopted as is, and we really look forward to congratulating the parties when this is concluded. This positive progress demonstrates the importance of disability advocacy right here in the UNFCCC and should prompt greater mainstreaming of disability across COP agenda items. Establishment of a financial facility for loss and damage remains the defining issue of COP27 and must be concluded swiftly to mobilise tangible support. We urge parties to ensure that this is inclusive of persons with disabilities and that parties' commitments represent new, additional and adequate finance. Finally, the UNFCCC must implement the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy with meaningful engagement of persons with disabilities. Nothing about us without us. There is no climate justice without disability justice. We are not yet defeated. Kia ora.
I thank you for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome the Right Reverend Arnold Temple on behalf of faith-based organizations. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Distinguished participants, the world's faith communities are deeply concerned over the ecological crisis we live in today. We face an existential threat to our only home. With greenhouse gas emissions rebounding to 2019 levels, the realization of the Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial level to avert the most calamitous consequences of climate change is at risk. There is an urgent need for a swift and system-wide transformation of our societies and economies to achieve the necessary reduction in emissions and build...
On the energy pillar, it is to translate the vision and the project that the Ministry of Electricity is going to be working on. But the whole point of the platform is to ensure that we have a concessional element which draws in private sector. All of us have been hearing about blended finance, that the private sector needs to be de-risked. So within this energy pillar, this is this money that we were able to raise during Cop27 or in the lead up of Cop27 is the seed money that will bring in private sector companies. And here private sector companies are not just Egyptian private sector, European private sector, it's open for all, and this is what is going to be happening over the next few months. Let me just mention on concessionality, and this is important, there's a lot of clarity on these projects, and we have a website on WEFI that has details. The 500 million concessional includes a part which is sovereign, part which is grant, and we thank the European Commission for the 35 million, which is the grant component, adds to the grant component. We have Germany as well. We have several of our bilateral development partners. So around 40% of the 500 are grants, and the rest is long-term concessional, including, of course, the debt swaps. So this is an example when we say that we are creating our own version of a country-led platform, which is NWEFI. This is exactly similar to the Just Energy Transition platforms, but it reflects what Egypt is doing, because we do not use coal, but we do have an acceleration of climate action that we want to do, and we provide this through projects which are implementable. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the gentleman next to the cameraman?
Hello. Oh, yeah. John Ainger, Bloomberg News. African activists have been very vocal in the first couple of weeks that the EU is using the continent as its gas station as it seeks to move away from Russian fossil fuels. What is your response to that? And Mr. Timmermans, you've mentioned the need to prefab any new gas facilities so they can take hydrogen in Africa. What kind of finance is the EU going to provide to do that?
Well, we had a discussion yesterday with a number of leading African countries, ministers, and you were there as well. And you see that many African countries are looking to speed up their development for understandable reasons, for demographic reasons, for geopolitical reasons, for economic reasons. And they see the reserves they have in hydrocarbons as part of that equation. This is not Europe trying to use Africa as a gas station, because Europe's need of gas will quickly diminish. That's a matter of a number of years, but that's not something that's going to be necessary once we've ramped up our renewable energy resourcing. But sometimes I wonder whether people don't underestimate the wish of African nations themselves to have the potential of development. What we're trying to do is to convince as much as we can African nations that, as Egypt is also doing, that investing in renewables is much more cost efficient and is much more forward-looking than investing in hydrocarbons, especially if you're talking about coal or oil. So that is the context within which we operate. And I honestly believe that this creates a partnership that will help African countries also speed up their energy transition. And I keep banging on about this because I truly believe in this. 600 million Africans today have no access to electricity. Just imagine if you can bring solar panels and wind turbines in all regions in Africa, what that would do to people's lives, to the development potential of Africa. And what the lady from Burkina Faso was saying earlier is something I've been thinking about a long time. If you see how many women, very often carrying small children, need to use very unhealthy ways of cooking their meals every day, which is really jeopardizing their health and the health of their children. Imagine these women having access to electricity that will allow them to do clean cooking. That would change their lives, and that would change it over generations. So I understand the criticism on fossil fuels, but I want you to see the context, and the context is also a strong wish of Africa to develop faster. And in that context, I believe renewable energy needs to play a key role, but I also believe that especially on gas can play a transitional role, and as you rightly said, especially if you combine the investment in infrastructure with fitting that infrastructure with the potential to also carry gases with other densities. But I know that Kadri wants to say something about this as well. She's the Energy Commissioner.
Just a very short remark on energy cooperation. As you know, after 2 weeks, on 28th of November, we will host African Union's commissioners to follow up the African Summit, EU-Africa Summit. And at that college meeting, we will also follow up the announcement made by Summit on Africa-EU Green Energy Initiative. So together with Global Gateway and Africa-EU Energy Initiative, we will mobilize about 3.4 billion euros. And these are also for support for renewable energy, energy efficiency, just transition, and greening the local value chain. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Ashraf Amin from Al-Ahram newspaper. My question is to Minister Al-Molla and perhaps Minister Shaker regarding the job opportunities, the expected job opportunities for the green jobs, and how far are we prepared to train the right technicians and engineers for the green hydrogen plants that will be launched soon.
Thank you.
Let me say, actually, we are taking the things very seriously. We have the personnel in order to operate this. Let me tell you, actually, a couple of days ago, we already attended the starting and operation of one of our turbines, which used to use natural gas. We used something different, which is natural gas blended with green hydrogen. So the green hydrogen is already supplied to an existing power station in Sharm el-Sheikh, and it's in operation. Our technicians are working excellently, and I was there, and all the measures to have it operated in the proper way has been respected. And by the way, actually, we are having a very ambitious plan, actually, to increase the dependence on the renewables. And our strategy, we should reach about 42% by the year 2035. And by the way, we are reviewing it now in order to see how we can increase this percentage and reduce by which time it will be completed. We already signed, to be honest with you, not only this MOUs or the framework agreements, but we signed real contracts for 28 gigawatt of wind energy. This was actually 2 weeks ago. And they start working because we have a reputation that when we sign something, we make sure that it will happen. And let me tell you, actually, 2014, Egypt was facing a very big problem in electricity, and in 3.5 years' time, we could manage to introduce in the network 3 gigawatt of electricity, and we completely get rid of all these problems. Our people are ready to operate, and this is not just talking, but I mean, I have a real example in operation now. Thank you.
Microphone.
Thank you. My name is Amgad Saeed, legal advisor for Dr. Mohammed Sheikh, the Minister of Electricity in Egypt. I have a request for EU Commission. As Dr. Sheikh mentioned yesterday during the Energy Day, we signed the 9 framework agreement with the main developers in the green hydrogen field. And one of the main common issues is the green certificate. We need EU to consider the African countries, especially Egypt, requirements for the green certificate for these projects in the regulation will be issued by EU to be able to make the financial closure of these projects. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Lady behind him.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Amani. I work in the Suez Canal Economic Zone. I just wanted to go back to the question by the Ahram newspaper regarding technical education when it comes to green hydrogen related jobs. And in this regard, I would like to say that the Suez Canal Economic Zone has signed during COP as well an agreement with one of the private sector leading institutions when it comes to technical education and vocational training to make sure that we are having the personnel as well as the development of the capacities that are going to be taking over when we have the green hydrogen projects in place. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman here.
Thank you. My name is Sands Michalopoulos. I'm a journalist for Iraq.com in Brussels. So the European Union is basically a question for the European Commission representatives. The European Union has taken a number of initiatives with Algeria, with Egypt now. My question is what the guarantees are toward these countries, and in case that that the European Union will switch back to the cheap Russian gas, in case that the war is over and diplomatic solution is found. Do you provide them with guarantees?
Thank you.
Russia has been unreliable partner, and this situation is irreversible. We will not return to the situation where Russia will provide Europe the share of gas like they did last year. Now, saying that, it is also clear that we will not replace all the lost Russian gas volumes with alternative suppliers. We will prioritize fuel switch, so from gas to electricity, but this takes time. And now when we have to find additional volumes from world market, then we will help our trading partners to capture, for example, methane that otherwise was leaked. We call it Q-Capture, we buy initiative. That allows us to bring to the market very fast additional volumes. This is going to happen, for example, with our trade with Algeria. And by doing so, we will not put additional pressure to the world gas market. As said, we do have trusted partners all across the globe. Some of them are connected with us via pipeline, and they have been great help. So far, Europe has replaced all the lost Russian volumes, and we have, on top of that, introduced clear saving measures, so that this is our attempt to avoid a situation where the rest of the world will feel the tight situation and high prices due to the Russian manipulation. Thank you.
If I can just add, just to underscore what Kadri said, once bitten, twice shy. Russia has decided to use its gas as a political weapon. We will never be in a situation again that Russia would be in a position to do that. And that is very clear, and that is unanimous in the European Union. But to the second part of your question, interestingly enough, all the countries we are talking to, Kadri is doing an incredible job in talking to them, all of them understand that our need of natural gas is only temporary, and all of them are interested to talk to us about the hydrogen economy that's coming. So that is the partnership, that is the framework within which you need to see those partnerships. They are long-term partnerships But nobody is naive about the development of those partnerships. We know the world is going to move away from fossil fuels, and those countries who today produce fossil fuels, most of them fully understand that they have some really, really interesting and strong assets that go beyond fossil fuels that would allow them also to be leading partners in the post-fossil fuel economy with hydrogen. And that is the partnerships they're also seeking with us. That is the nature of the conversation we are having with them.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellencies, and thank you all. It is time to wrap up. Sorry.
In several weeks.
Thank you for that. So we have a couple more minutes, so we can take another question, if there is any.
Thank you. This is a question to, I think, Heidi and Sandeep as well, just on the link between debt and biodiversity as well. And we hear of things like debt for nature swaps and debt for climate swaps, but what you're proposing is debt cancellation, which is different from that. How can that free up the resources to be able to better target action, productive action around biodiversity and also climate action? Thank you.
So I think we've heard a lot of different governments talking more and more about debt for climate swaps, debt for nature swaps. And actually, what is really needed in this situation is actually significant debt cancellation because of the scale of the debt crisis. Debt for climate swaps normally do not, what we've seen is that they normally do not include large amounts of debt. They're quite insignificant in terms of the bigger debt pile. But also, ultimately, countries should be able to decide where resources that are released from debt cancellation should go into, rather than having that be determined by creditors in that situation.
Maybe just to add, in terms of what the colleague has said, I think it's becoming much more clearer and clearer that the biodiversity crisis is also a climate crisis. So, and there are many scientific publications on that part, and even if you look at the IPCC working group 2 report in particular, there are very cross-link, I would say very good connection in terms of how the biodiversity crisis is really linked to the climate crisis and vice versa. And most of the countries are really getting that, and we hope that the message that comes from this particular COP will really save a good outcome at the COP15 as well. And coming back to the very earlier question in terms of the hope of this particular COP, I would say in the UNFCCC process, we need to have a hope as well as the faith, because for the many vulnerable countries, this is the only platform to raise their voice in terms of the victims, and also to demand, let's say, for compensation or for the damages as well as losses. So we are still in the, let's say, 2 more days to go for the negotiation, yet is not yet over. And I hope the negotiation will finish on time on Friday evening. Let's cross our finger on that part. But still, there are some final moment of the negotiation, and we have seen a very good conversion within the G77, especially in the light of establishing loss and damage finance fund at this particular COP. So let's see how that moves on, and hope we will get a good outcome at this particular COP, and I would say a good outcome of this COP on this issue of loss and damage finance, and place a good legacy of this Africa COP on this particular issue.
Thank you. So we are now on the top of the hour, which means that this conference will be over. Our speakers will still be available outside the room for any further media questions. Hope to see you here tomorrow at the same time. Thank you.
which is here. I want to present a couple of the nature-based solutions that we are trying to promote in the country. So if we can just follow me. So the sea level rise is for us in the ministry is a big issue, especially in the north coast of Egypt. And we try to accommodate this by having some nature-based solutions. I cannot claim that all what we are doing is nature-based, but this is of course a movement, and we are trying also to use this. We have, as you can see here, this point, this red points. These are ports that are threatened by the sea level rise, and can be also be suffering from overtopping in the future. But also when we have storm, then they suffer also from the high level of the sea. So we can see here different scenarios. I'm not going to go in technical details. I know engineers are always weird. They like to go directly to technical details, but the ecologists and biologists, and such a nice and quiet session, and people are speaking in a very smooth way, and then comes an engineer, stands speaking about technical details. So I do apologize in advance. So here you have different sea levels that are causing or threatening the north coast of Egypt, and these are the most expensive and very intensive area, especially the city of Alexandria and the other surrounding cities. And you can see here different scenarios, and also the red color is what happened in the year 2010, 2011 and 2015 with different colors. What happened here, that we had storm, and we have seen the sea level moving 1.2 meter above the sea level, and then caused all these flooding and damages in the city. So it gives us also or raise a flag here about what will happen with the sea level rise that we are facing and we are seeing here in this storm. So the idea is to protect the north coast. This is a GCF project that we are implementing with the UNDP, and we are trying to use different nature-based. You see different colors, the orange, the red, the green, the yellow, and the blue. These are different colors on the north coast for areas that are threatened by the sea level rise, and we are trying to use here nature-based solutions that I will show you in the coming. So if you can just go back to the previous one, you can see here the length, 6 kilometers and 29 in the city or in the governorate of Kafr Sheikh. the Kahliya 11, and you have the Maita and Port Said 11 and 12. So these are the kilometers length that we already protected from the sea level rise using a nature-based solution. So what does it mean, nature-based solution here for us? As you can see here, you have the sea, and then we try to use here fill materials, and this also natural materials, soil or sand, and then we cover it with the sand from the site, so it's the same material that you have in the site. We cover this filling materials, and then we use what we call the sand fans. And the sand fans is, these are local materials coming from the local people, and let me tell you, the idea itself, it's also coming from the local people. And then when you have the wind, the sand start moving, and then you build another layer of sand surrounding this sand fence, as you can see here in the graph. So all the soil is, or the structure is becoming now a protection, a natural protection from the floods. Here, who are preparing these nature-based materials are these women. So we involve the community not only in developing the idea, and we try to structure it in a more engineering way, but also we involve women in the process of creating such material. So we create a job, a decent job for them, so that they can also be active with us. And this is a situation here. You can see on the right side one picture with a slightly water start moving towards us, but you can see in the one at the left side, what you see here is not sand. I don't know that you can see it, but this is water. What you see on the picture on the left side, it's really functioning, and it's really working and standing in towards and supporting, protecting the community on the other side from the sea level rise. So this is a wonderful project for us. Of course, we plan this to be in a more nicer, and we have here some plantations, so that at the end you see a very nice location, and hopefully you will be able to visit it later on, because what I described and the pictures focusing on this, but the entire area has been planned in a different way so that you can see at here. So a project that's nature-based, involved in community. The second case that I want to go through it very fast is about mangrove. The one I showed before in the north coast, but this is on the Red Sea. On the Red Sea here, we have the mangrove. And this is mangrove. Mangrove is deteriorating, and they're saying declining the area, and some others say, no, it's not declining. And can we move to the next, please? We did a lot. I mean, we worked with the community together. We have done some research to understand why mangrove, because I have seen many lectures about mangroves. The last one was in Germany a couple of months ago. And some people, some colleagues were speaking about mangrove plantation directly. So we wanted to understand why mangroves disappear. It's just because we as the human beings are misusing the beaches and sands, or there is a reason for disappearing mangrove from the coastal areas. So we had some research here. One very interesting findings that we are also publishing now, that mangrove requires a bit of less salinity than the sea water. So when we mixed seawater with a bit of fresh water, it had given us very interesting results, and this will be coming in very soon in the publications. So what you see here is our greenhouses that we have on the Red Sea, and we're trying to, the seedlings, the plantation process, first we have it in the greenhouse, and then we plant them directly on the sea in the locations we identify based on a GIS. I'm going to skip a little bit and go a little bit faster. So here is the plantation process that you can see here. These are our greenhouses in which we test different water salinities, different conditions for the mangrove to understand more about mangrove. But here in this picture you see what is the role of the community, and we want to show the community that having mangrove will bring them something back. So having mangrove for ecotourism is also a very important source for the community. So we want to encourage the community to protect the mangroves themselves. So we are going to hand over the project, and we want it to sustain. So bird watching is one of the activities that the community can attract tourists in the area. Mangrove tour with boats, as you can see here in the picture, community tent and having mangrove in the area. I'm not going to go in these technical details because this is a remote sensing type of approach to analyze where mangrove grows and where mangrove disappears. And we have found results that are confirming our research that the mangrove is shrinking and disappearing in the areas where you have human activities, especially when you raise camels in the area, because young camels, they eat the leaves of the mangrove in some areas. And in some other areas, there are also other intensive touristic activities. So in these areas, we see mangrove is reducing, but in other areas, we see mangrove increasing. And when we analyze the areas in which mangrove is increasing, like the one next to this one, here you can realize the picture on the left side. I think this was like 2007 up to 2022. So it's almost, I don't know, 25 years of analysis. What you see on the left side is a mangrove that started to increase to reach the size that you can see on the right side. And we analyzed why the mangrove is increasing. We realized that this is the wadi area in which the rainfall comes from the higher land, and it goes to the sea, and this point of mixing between the fresh water and salty water is causing reduction in the salinity of the water in these locations, and in turn mangrove grows more in this area, which means increasing temperature in the future will make the water more saline and mangrove will shrink. But in the areas in which you have less sea water salinity, you will have more mangrove. This is at least what our research had proven. So next. Anyway, so I think this was the last slide. And these have shown you two examples for nature-based solutions, one for the north coast of Egypt and a protection used in nature-based solutions, and one for the eastern coast of Egypt, in which based on mangrove. I hope it was useful for you. Thank you very much and enjoy the session.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister, for your intervention and comments about, okay, be welcome, don't worry, about nature-based solutions. I will have to wrap up because they're a little bit later, okay? And I would like to highlight 2 or 3 things here. It's very important that because we need to hand over this for Stuart. Where is Stuart? Is Stuart here? Where is Stuart? Stuart, would you mind to join me because I'd like to hand over to you the second session. Please sit down here because I want to wrap up our session now. We have been discussing here hope, okay? And for hope, we need people. This is the first conclusion that's absolutely clear when you go in concrete actions here to make sure that you can operate solutions. My second point here, when you go into natural-based solutions, it's very important, as mentioned by the Minister of Egypt, that we need to have nature protection also. The solution must allow us to protect humankind. And this is very, very important because without people, again, we don't have hope. My third point here, it's very important to observe for you both, for the private sector and also financial sector. When you go into carbon markets, when you go into carbon commodities that probably were emerging as a trend in this issue, we need nature to hedge these carbons because we need to capture and fix the carbons. And only nature will allow that this carbon to stay there. So this is important that you can provide, as you mentioned, natural capture values, and you can understand how you can add value for carbon plus nature indicators or nature assets. And finally, as mentioned here, the importance of a natural resource agenda. natural resource inefficient use means that you can impact 9% of biodiversity loss in the world is because of natural resource inefficiency. Also, around 6% of greenhouse emissions, and also around 9% of water scarcity and stress. So if we want to bridge these things, as the minister highlighted here, let's take really new lens to address concrete solutions and natural resource use. And more than this, how South-South countries, they are absolutely critical and essential if you want to drive solutions in short-term perspective. So I think that we need to move beyond, as a former minister for the environment, we need to move beyond the environmental constituency. We need to have a nature constituency, political constituency, where everyone a part of the solution and nobody will be a part. So connect people, connect solutions, connecting hope. And I will hand over for Stuart Clam. You have, like to thank very much the panelists, and I invite you, let's do it because we can move faster. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, everyone. I think we'll now move into the next session. So I'd like to welcome everyone, excellencies, friends and colleagues. My name is Stuart McGuinness. I'm the Deputy Director General of IUCN. And to begin our session, I'm delighted to be joined by 5 of the founding partners of this initiative. Her Excellency Yasmin Fouad, Minister of Environment of the Arab Republic of Egypt. Her Excellency Steffi Lemke, German Federal Minister for the Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection. His Excellency Espen Eide, Minister of Climate and Environment from Norway. His Excellency Eisenhower Ndua Mkaka, Minister of Natural Resources and Climate Change.
Everything that they have on their plate with the proper resources, and so we need the scale of these to be very significantly increased.
Taking on the scale question, as very rightly Maria Lara pointed out, there are other innovative instruments for financing that are being also talked about outside this process for loss and damage, including the special drawing rights of the IMF and how they could be channelized for addressing loss and damage. There are also options related to taxation of windfall profits of oil and gas companies, the air travel levies, and also small but very significant gestures of crowdsourcing funding from those of us who are very conscious about the issue and would like to contribute, make a significant, even though small contribution to this particular issue. So while there are questions or concerns about, public budgets being limited to diverting or channelizing funding for loss and damage, there are other innovative instruments being talked about. And the very fact that there is a call for new and additional financing for loss and damage, that call is premised on what you pointed out, that there should be no diversion of funding from adaptation to loss and damage. Both of them are important. If we do not adapt significantly or maladapt, there would be much higher losses and damages. So adaptation financing is critical, but so is loss and damage financing, because we are in an era now where there is devastation, due to various climate-related events taking place, and the Pakistan situation, of course, is on the top of the mind of everyone out here. Thank you.
Well, let me just add that the reason why we are where we are now with significant
losses and damages being incurred is because we've been foot dragging on the issue of financing mitigation, driving deeper with mitigation, and also adaptation. It seems to me illogical to divert funds from adaptation to loss and damage, in a sense saying, well, we're going to have to wait and let more disasters happen, and then we're going to fund it. Clearly, the right thing to do is to continue to press hard on adaptation and mitigation while also finding additional money for loss and damage. And the issue of additionality has always been very, very clear from the UNFCCC convention days that climate finance has to be additional. This has not always been the case, and those countries that are expressing doubt and worry are perfectly legitimate to be in the position they are, because past experience has shown that transparency has not always been the key value in the way that finances flow, where they flow from and where they flow to. It is critical, as my colleagues have said, that this is not a diversion, but an addition.
Topics like nature-based solutions in ocean and coastal ecosystems, nature-based solutions with agriculture, nature-based solutions on cities, etc. So now, without further ado, and to launch this exciting partnership, it is my great pleasure to invite Minister Fouad to officially launch the ENACT partnership on nature-based solutions. Minister Fouad.
You want me to speak from here or from here?
You can speak from here if you're comfortable,
yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me at the outset express my thanks and appreciation at a very historical moment of my life. In this beautiful city where Egypt hosted the CBD Cop14 on biodiversity. And at that time, we were thinking of how best to draw a map that's ambitious, that is realistic and doable for biodiversity, to draw the roadmap for biodiversity for the post-2020 framework. And 3 years of working with partners, the family of the biodiversity, and giving the presidency over to our dear colleagues and friends from China, where we are glad that they are presidenting the CBD convention and will be there in Montreal altogether. But this is a historical moment of the same city also hosting the climate conference, Cop27. And it would have been a missed opportunity if Egypt presidency was not able to establish that drastic linkage between climate and biodiversity and having the land at the heart of that. Because simply the nature has screamed high on that linkages, and it's there and evident every single day in our life, and it's there around the world. So let me at the outset, first of all, express my deepest appreciation as well as thanks to the IUCN team and the team from the Ministry of Environment, who has been working so hard in order to bring this initiative into life. And thanks to my sister Razan and Mubarak, President of the IUCN, for also supporting that. And I'm sure that the road from COP27 to COP28 would have the NBS at the heart for that, for the livelihood of our people. But also, my sister, also the co-chair minister from Germany, Stevie Lamach, the German Federal Minister for Environment, Nature and Conservation, for co-chairing this initiative. Thank you very much, Stevie, for that. It's a pleasure and an honor, and I know that two women on the heart of an initiative that serves the people will do a lot on that. As well as I'm delighted on the presence of our ENACT partners. I know that Her Excellency Sherry Rahmani, Minister of Climate Change of Pakistan, is not here, but greetings to her as being partner to this initiative. Also, my dear brother, Minister of Natural Resources and Climate Change of the Republic of Malawi, His Excellency Makaka, thank you very much for being there with us. Also, Ms. Brenda Mallory, the chair of the Council on Environmental Quality, the Executive Office of the President from the USA, also is being partnered to that. And the best also, but not the least, is the European Commissioner for the Environment, His Excellency Virginis. Thank you very much for being there, and you've been a great advocate for the biodiversity and ocean in different venues, as well as His Excellency, the Minister of Climate and Environment of Norway, His Excellency Baras Idi, for joining us. I also would like to announce other partners from Japan and Slovenia as being part of that. In the morning, I've given very quick remarks on nature-based solution, how a 10 gigatons of carbon dioxide would be a potential of saving through nature-based solution, which is even larger than the transport sector and the emissions from that. It is my pleasure really to launch that initiative with all those partners, with my fellow colleague from Germany, and we promise you that we will spare no effort on the road to COP15 to make it that livable, implementable, and fit for all the people around the world, because that is the rescue for our climate and biodiversity crisis, and together for implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Fuad. It truly is a groundbreaking moment. I think it is really significant. I would now like to focus it. Next up is Germany, and Germany has been an advocate for nature-based solutions for more than 10 years, financing implementation on the ground. So it's an honour to invite Minister Lemke to make her statement as co-chair of this initiative. Minister Lemke.
Thank you so much, dear Stuart and Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen. I too would like to welcome you all on Biodiversity Day, and I want to say thank you to Egypt to this initiative to have the first Biodiversity Day here on a climate COP. Thank you so much. We all know that biodiversity loss and the climate crisis are inextricably linked, and the two crises are mutually reinforcing and have to be tackled together. This is why we have to take resolute action now to lay the foundations for a nature-friendly, climate-neutral and resilient future. In my view, three aspects are crucial. Firstly, nature-based solutions. We can use nature-based solutions to tackle the climate and biodiversity crises at the same time. This is exactly where the new INACT partnership comes in. I'm very grateful to the Egyptian presidency for this initiative. And I also thank IUCN for taking over the Secretariat. Germany will be involved as a partner and co-chair in order to move forward on acceptance and implementation of NBS. And I hope that many partners will support us. After all, nature is our most powerful ally in combating the climate and biodiversity crises. Intact ecosystems store carbon dioxide, secure our food and water supplies, and protect against disasters. Nature-based solutions can create jobs and contribute to economic and social development. But to achieve this, they need to be supported by effective safeguards and standards. This is something we pay close attention to in both our international and national projects. In Germany, we are leading by example with a comprehensive federal action plan on nature-based solutions for climate and biodiversity, and by 2026 we will invest in nature-based solutions with robust social and environmental safeguards, protect biodiversity, and help us tackle many challenges such as climate change, food security, water supply, and emergency preparedness. However, it is emphatic that nature-based solutions cannot replace the necessary restructuring of our economics, large-scale decarbonization and emission reductions. But they are an essential additional component to achieve the Paris Agreement goals. We have to take our cautious approach because not all options for enhancing natural carbon sinks benefit people and biodiversity, so they cannot automatically qualify as NBS. It is also important to have broader political acceptance and support. I find it regrettable that such an important concept as nature-based solutions is not included in the Glasgow Final Declaration or the current draft of the Global Biodiversity Framework. They should, without doubt, be an integral part of the global framework. We took an important step this year with the MBS and UNEA's 5 resolution. We need more to build on this. More specifically, I hope that we, with your support, Mr. Ford, will be able to lay down key elements in this COP's final declaration. I hope it will happen. The UN Decade on Ecosystems Restoration is a reminder of our vision, a world in which we restore the balance between humankind and nature. We should also use the concept of nature-based solutions to promote better cooperation between the Rio Conventions. Thank you so much. Thank you to the Egypt presidency for this initiative. I hope you will support us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister Lemke. Moving on, and I apologise, I would like to reflect on each of these comments because I think they are significant, but I know we're running out of time and see I'm being given signals to move on. So I would now like to actually turn to some more of the founding partners of this to make some statements. And Commissioner Sikavico, so I'd like to turn to you. We've all been inspired by the European Green Deal and applauded its ambition. Could you describe for us the role that nature-based solutions will play in its implementation?
Yes, thank you very much, and of course, thank you very much for the previous remarks, which I think are absolutely excellent and draws a very clear need for nature-based solutions to be that actually clicking part between two COPs, Cop27 and Cop15, which we're still missing. And there is still a lot of work to be done as regards the spreading the message to decision makers, but also to society, what benefits nature-based solutions they can bring, what new opportunities they can bring to our businesses. But I think we find ourselves now in a very difficult spot. Despite our collective efforts during the past few decades, the challenges, they are getting harder. And it's now painfully clear that we face a planetary emergency filled by biodiversity loss and climate change. And our best hope now is deep cuts in emissions and then a rapid scaling up of technological and, of course, nature-based solutions. And that makes the ENACT, the Partnership for Nature-Based Solution, both very timely but also extremely important. I'm very happy to announce that the European Union is joining the ENACT partnership with the UNEA resolution on nature-based solutions for sustainable development adopted earlier this year. We now have the absolute clarity that we need to go forward. And the resolution will be followed by an intergovernmental consultation to support implementation, and I think close collaboration between ENACT, and this process would bring, of course, great benefits for both. The EU has been steadily investing in nature-based solutions through both the European Green Deal and our programs for research and innovation. In fact, EU research programs have already invested more than 440 million euros.
عندي كذا سؤال، فحضرتك تحبي ان انا اقول سؤال واحد؟ تمام. هرجع لزميلتي بتاعت إيشا، سألت حضرتك حاجات محددة بخصوص نوفي. هي كانت بتتكلم على يوم 8 وحضرتك برضه على يوم 8 تقريبا، ان احنا كنا بنتكلم على 10.3، حضرتك قلت ان في 7 منهم لنوفي.
7 نوفي
في 3
وفي 3 للمشروعات الاخرى.
تمام. حضرتك رجعتي وقلتي ان في كوب 28 ممكن هنكون وصلنا ساعتها لل 14.7
بتوع نوفي. لا، نوفي 14 و7، فاحنا خلصنا 7 منهم، هنجيب ال7 الباقيين خلال ال 12 شهر.
كده ممتاز. المشروعات بقى المدى الزمني بتاعها امتى ان احنا نقدر نشوفها بالفعل موجود على ارض الواقع؟
طبعا اهميه لما بقول ان المشروعات واضحه، لكل مشروع في كونسبت نوت، في يعني مذكره بتوضح كل مرحله من مراحل المشروعات، لان هذه التمويلات ما بتجيش. احنا مثلا يعني لما نبص على مشروع زي مشروع بحر البقر، ده بتمويلات ميسره مع شركاء التنميه. لما نبص على الجبل الاصفر، لما نبص على لما نبص على تكافل وكرامه، فاحنا لينا فيما مضى لكل مشروع بيبقى فيه كونسبت نوت او مذكره مفاهيميه فيها كل التفاصيل، فدي كلها متاحه، ممكن يعني على الويب سايت حضرتك تقراها بالتفصيل. والاهم من ده زي ما قلت، كام حد مستفيد من هذه، قد ايه كيوبيك متر اوف ووتر هتبقى ديسالينيتد، قد ايه من الجيجا واتس هتبقى يعني مولده من هذا المشروع، فكل ده يعني متاح. وفي لو في بعض المشروعات محتاجه تأهيل زياده، برضو من خلال ايرينا اللي هو الوكالة الدولية للطاقة، ده كان احد الشراكات اللي قمنا بالتوقيع عليها يوم 8، وايضا مع صندوق الاستثمار المناخ CIF. ففي غير الدعم المالي او التمويلات المالية، في ايضا الدعم الفني. فهذه المنصة فيها جزء اللي هو المنح، مبادلة ديون، تمويلات ميسرة، وأيضا الدعم الفني لتأهيل المشروعات لو في أي حاجة محتاجين إنها تبقى مور كلاريفايد. وكل ده زي ما قلت لجذب استثمارات القطاع الخاص.
The increasing frequency of droughts and floods are affecting lives and livelihoods in Malawi and other vulnerable countries. According to the Global Climate Risk Index 2021, 5 African countries are ranked among the 10 countries most affected by extreme weather in 2019. Mozambique being first, Zimbabwe second, Malawi 5th, South Sudan 8th, and Niger 9th. The negative societal effects of climate change, such as loss of life and livelihood, are already and will continue to be tragic and severe, and are a key concern to governments and individuals. Delayed transition to a low-carbon economy that integrates fully nature-based solutions will increase vulnerability to already vulnerable countries. Over the years, Malawi has experienced significant challenges related to climate change, such as floods, droughts, soil erosion, food insecurity, water insecurity, among many others. We need action. We need to respond to these challenges urgently. The government of Malawi is taking all necessary measures to mitigate and adapt to climate change. In 2016, the country committed to restoring 4.5 million hectares of our degraded lands, and this was a political step to prioritize nature-based solutions for food security, water security, and biodiversity conservation. As one way of creating wealth for all, His Excellency the President of the Republic of Malawi is leading the fulfillment of the Malawi Vision 2063, and the country needs jobs for young people. By implementing nature-based solutions, Malawi believes some of these jobs can be created and sustained. My government also recognizes that the private sector can play a critical role in determining how biodiversity is used and conserved. There are clear benefits to businesses in improving environmental and climate risk management performance, such as reduced costs, improved innovation, increased likelihood of regulatory approval, and of course not forgetting increased profitability. It is important to mention that these efforts require collaboration both at technical and financial levels. Hence, I am pleased to see IUCN, our long-term technical partner, as well as Germany and other development partners, jointly launch this initiative. Malawi is committed to scaling up nature-based solutions across our development sectors, such as agriculture, energy, urban infrastructure, just to mention but a few. Malawi will continue to explore opportunities to work with both our technical and financial partners in scaling up nature-based solutions as we fight impacts of climate change. I would like, therefore, to officially confirm that Malawi is pleased to join other countries here present as a founding member of ENACT, and we look forward to continuing working together. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Minister Mkaka. I would now like to turn to the fifth founding member of ENACT for his statement, and then we'll change panels. Minister Eide, Norway has long been a champion of the nature-climate link. We can think back several years, and Norway has been there. I'd like to know from you, what do you think that nature-based solutions brings to the table in addition to the work that's gone on before?
Thank you. Dear colleagues, friends, we are nature. We depend on nature, and we need to partner with nature in order to survive. It's as simple as that. And I am so pleased and I'm so thankful both to IUCN and to the COP presidency, and personally to you, my sister Jasmine, for putting this so high on the agenda. It's the first time in the climate COP. And as Steffi Lemke very correctly said, we were not able to use the word constellation nature-based solutions in COP26 because there was resistance. It was said it's not agreed UN language. Well, friends, we fixed that because at UNEA 5, which I had the honor of being president of, we actually adopted universally the first ever UN resolution on nature-based solutions. You can look it up, the resolution is there. It's a clear and precise definition of what nature-based solution is and a recognition of its importance for the climate work and, of course, needless to say, for our biodiversity work. The importance of nature for biodiversity is obvious. It's imperative, we know. But here, the main point, it's also massively important for climate. In many cases, it's the least expensive way of reducing emissions fast. It's, in many cases, also the least expensive way of increasing of improving mitigation efforts because of preserving carbon sinks. Only requires us not to destroy them. It's not costly, just stop destroying nature. And it's also, in many cases, the most effective and least expensive way to adapt, because, for instance, in coastal areas where applicable, mangroves both catch carbon very fast, but they also stabilize the ground so that floods are less dramatic, and they provide for biodiversity for which we can live, fish and so on, just to take one example. So nature-based solutions is a sine qua non. And I think the reason, thanks to the efforts of IUCN and the COP presidency and others and the UNEA crowd, which managed to get this resolution adopted, is that when we start planning for not only halve our emissions, but to go to net zero, it's simply not possible without nature. I'm a great fan of carbon capture and storage as technology. But we already have a lot of carbon capture or storage called photosynthesis. It's a very known technology. It's been around before we came to the planet. And if we allow it to work, it will do much of our work to take us to net zero. Of course, needless to say, we still have to cut our emissions massively, but we also need to partner with nature. So it's incredibly important. I'm very proud to be part of this great initiative. And from now on, I suggest that whenever we talk about climate, we remember nature. And then when many of us meet in Montreal in 3 weeks' time, we remember climate when we speak about nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I've been instructed I need to get a photograph to capture this occasion, so could I ask the next panel to come up and maybe we can very quickly have a photograph here, and then I'll invite...